Hi, everyone. I'm Stan Mallow. Welcome to Paranormal Yakker. My guest today is spiritual psychotherapist Tiffany Lazic. I'll be yakking with her about her book, The Noble Art From Shadow to Essence, Through the Wheel of the Year, An Alchemical Journey to Harmony and Healing. Tiffany Lazic, welcome to Paranormal Yakker.
Thank you, Stan. It's lovely to be here.
To begin with, Tiffany, I would appreciate you dissecting the different components in the title of your book. Specifically, why do you call what you're writing about noble art? What is meant by from shadow to essence? And what is the wheel of the year?
There's a few components in there, and maybe it actually would be best to start at the end with the wheel of the year. The wheel of the year being a lens through which one can look at the seasonal cycle that has its roots in a pagan tradition. It's not an ancient tradition, but it's sort of a modern overlay of what seasons and holidays have been celebrated for millennia. So this wheel of the year is an eightfold approach to the seasons, where there's two festivals that each for fall and winter and spring and summer, and that each of them, we know what some of them are. Like, we're coming up to one with the winter solstice and Christmas. That's one of the spokes of the eightfold wheel of the year. So what I did was start with that as a template, which I've been very interested in for a very long time, and has formed part of my own practice in how I connect with nature, and realizing that it also allows us to be able to sort of explore a sense of self as well, because we're not separate from nature. So to be able to sort of say, okay, if there are these 8 sort of spokes as a way of exploring the year, the wheel of the year, and the journey that we go through in the wheel of the year, then how can we also start to look at that as being something that we go through as well, being part of nature? So that's sort of the one part of it, is just looking at this seasonal cycle. The other part, starting with the noble art, is a reference to alchemy, the ancient spiritual science of alchemy. The first that I wrote was called The Great Work. That is a direct reference to the work of alchemy, which is the science of transformation and transmutation. And that's a whole show into itself, so I won't get into all the ins and outs of that. But, the great work, which is the great work, self-knowledge and healing through the wheel of the year, was a way of being able to sort of position our own process of transformation in these seasonal cycles. The noble art it takes it to a deeper level. So the noble art is actually a reference to alchemy itself. Alchemy is the noble art. The work that is done in the context of alchemy, the work of transformation and transmutation, the work itself is the great work. The process itself is the noble art. This idea of from shadow to essence, kind of what it's all about. When you look at the grand cycle of the wheel of the year, we right now, well, I should say we're in December right now, because I'm assuming people can watch this at any time in years to come. But like right now, you and I, we're sitting at the beginning of December. We're coming up to the winter solstice. We are in the dark of the year. We're in the shadow of the year, right? We also go through periods in our own lives when we're in shadow. And so the noble art is looking at how you can move from the dark into the light, and using the energy and the mythology and the symbolism and the archetypal language of nature to support us in that. And I apologize, we have some nature that might be crowding in a little bit.
The noble art provides spiritual, psychological, and energetic tools for reclaiming your essence through the stages and seasons of life. What is the essence that is being reclaimed, and what are the different stages and seasons of life?
Again, they're such big possible topics, and also very personal as well to some degree. So I love this idea of this sense of essence. This is part of what alchemy is all about, where if you look to the ancient Egyptians and the ancient art of embalming, where you take something and you take it apart to its different components, and then you bring it together in a different way. And the way that you bring it together is it sort of presents it in an even truer form, a deeper form. Essential oils is very, very similar, that you take a rose and you break it down, you break it down, you break it down, and you get one little drop that is like the pure essence of what that whole whole rose is all about. And so when we look to ourselves, when we're talking about essence, it's that we can experience all of these different parts of ourselves. Like I'm sitting here with you today, you're seeing a slice of what is my workspace, and that gives you a tiny, tiny piece of a picture of who I am. And in different other aspects of my life, you would see a different slice or sliver aspect of who I am. But there's something that is the essence of a being that continues. It shows up in all of those places. It is not defined by those places, but it informs all of those places. And I think what happens as we go through life, well, very definitely, and this is what I've certainly seen and worked with in psychotherapy, my work as a psychotherapist, is that we come to a place where we experience ourselves as defined by the people around us or the things that we do or the events that have happened to us, particularly that last, that we are defined by the things that have happened to us or the pain that we have experienced. We lose sight of the fact that there is an essence that is within us, that it is in it's embedded in every single one of our cells, that connects us to something which is greater than ourselves, that connects us to the sense of spirit, that transcends each individual moment. To have tools and language and processes that can help to guide us back to that truth of who we are. I see a lot of this as it forming the foundation of empowerment. We can be in the depth of winter. We can be at 4:30 in the afternoon on December the 10th when it is going to be dark and it is going to be cold, but we can remember that there is a light that will always show up. And that's how we want to experience ourselves as well. We're in a bit of a challenging time in the world, right? But we can't lose sight of the light.
Each spoke of the wheel of the year represents an opportunity, transformation. In that regard, Tiffany, you provide meditations, inner workings, and rituals that invite the reader to drop into the landscape of their unconscious and restore their light. Can you give an example of that process?
This is why I love working with the cycle of the seasons as a metaphor. We know that in a time of planting, I'm not going to go out and harvest, right? And in a time of harvest, I'm not going to go and sow. Like I want to be aware of what is being called for in any time of life. And so it gets back. I didn't totally address one of the questions that you had, which was around, the different developmental stages. A lot of what I've pulled together in both of my books, actually, I pull on mythology, I pull on psychology and try to, marry those two together, which I guess in itself is a bit of an alchemical process. But Erik Erikson and then others after him, who's wrote a book in the 60s. Actually, I think it was actually in the 50s, which presented these human developmental stages. As an infant, what is it that the infant requires? What is the developmental polarity of an infant child? What is the ego strength that is being developed in an infant child? And actually, in infancy, it's trust. That being 100% dependent on a caregiver allows us to surrender to a sense of trust that all our needs are going to be met. And we need to have that in place in order to move into the next stage of development, which is around the toddler and its exploration and curiosity, which creates a different ego strength within us as being able to we're starting to develop some confidence and curiosity and knowing that out of that safety, we can safely go and discover the world. And we need that in order to move into the next level of development. As we move through life, we're learning different strengths within ourselves. We're applying those strengths into the world. And then we're building upon that in order to grow into the next stage. It's very similar when we look at the cycle of the seasons, that there is in winter, a stillness that allows us to be able to tap into the deep stores of energy that are waiting to birth forth. And then as we move from there into early spring, which is like Groundhog Day, there's more of this. There's movement, and certainly in this part of the world, I say it's the freeze and the thaw. And then there's movement, and then it stops. And we're developing a relationship with assessment of when do I move and when do I need to stop and draw on those stores of energy again. And that moves us into late spring, where agriculturally there's the tilling of the field and the planting of the seed. And I need to know how I need to best care for myself and what it is that I'm trying to accomplish in order to best utilize that particular season. Out of that, then I have in both books, I mean, they approach it sort of differently. The great work is more about looking at your own inner processes, questions every single day to come to a different level of self-awareness. the noble art is really sort of pulling it into the practices with meditations, guided meditations and visualizations and contemplations and rituals, and that really help to kind of hone that self-knowledge and being able to bring sort of a greater awareness of how do I bring these strengths out into my life to make a difference in my life.
In your book, Tiffany, you explore how Hermetic principles can be utilized to reflect a person's highest potential. For those who may not be familiar with Hermetic principles, could you explain what they are and in what manner can they be used to reflect a person's higher potential?
Hermetic principles, again, are the sort of a branch of alchemy, the Hermetic sciences that grew out of that great wisdom teaching. There are 7 Hermetic laws or principles that, with a lot of things with alchemy shrouded in a little bit of mystery, what tends to be presented is that there is a book that came out in the early 20th century by 3 mysterious individuals who were referred to as the 3 initiates. It was called the Kabbalion. There are these 7 principles, the Hermetic principles, that were presented in that book. They can be understood as being the universal laws of spirit. So the same way that there are the laws of physics, that we know that these are the laws by which our physical universe operates. We know the law of gravity. Even though I don't understand all the ins and outs of the law of gravity, perhaps, I know enough about it to know that if I hold something up and I let it go, it will drop. That's what I know about the law of gravity. The Hermetic principles operate the same way. Most people will understand the Hermetic principles from the law of attraction, that there is a resonance. There's the laws of correspondence and the law of vibration that says that if I vibrate my energy at a certain resonance, the resonance of love, then by correspondence, by polarity, I will attract to me that as well. And so when I contemplate these 7 Hermetic principles, these universal laws, these spiritual laws, if I truly sit with what does the law of correspondence mean to me, that law of similars and relationship, then how can I start to work with it in my life so that I am in alignment with the universal laws? I need to work with the law of gravity if I want to hang a picture, right? So I'm not just going to put it on the wall and let it go. I'm going to put something that's going to hold it. Otherwise it's going to fall. So I want to understand and work with the universal laws as well in order to be able to be truly sort of empowered and effective in my life.
In the Noble Art, you provide powerful rituals your readers can use for planting seeds of intention and overcoming shame and emotional blocks. What emotional blocks have you found most people find themselves having to face, and what life situations cause them the most shame?
I would say actually that shame is the core root cause of every emotional block. Emotional blocks would be defined as all of those ways that my sense of flawedness, where they sort of interfere with my ability to be engaged and authentic in my life. So shame is always the present for that. It may show up in my defensiveness. It may show up in my perfectionism. It may show up in my workaholicism, but it's always going to be informed by shame. And it's almost because there are so many different ways that shame can show up in people's lives or for the first time, like that, what has caused that. How I learned, and certainly the template that I work with, is that we have this relationship, or we have this dynamic inside where I come into the world from this place of essence. There can be, we can bring things in from past life. We can bring in experiences in utero, so that even as I come into the world, that maybe I'm bringing an energy with me. But for the most part, as this infant self, if there were words, the self-awareness would be of perfection. Here I am. And it can be almost immediate that a different self-awareness starts to come in. Maybe I do need to shift who I am. This dynamic between perfection, this whole perfect being that I know myself to be, and this flawed, imperfect, potentially rejectable being. We need to come back to a place where we experience ourselves as whole. to be able to address that which, we are going to be imperfect, but that doesn't mean that we're not lovable just as we are.
You include in your book recommendations for stones, chakras, and affirmations that deepen healing work and support the transmutation of shadow into light. Can you give an example of one of those affirmations?
With each of the seasons, so part of what I've done in both of the books is looking at what the core essence, mythological theme of each of the spokes is. Not only do those also relate to the different Hermetic principles or laws, the different alchemical stages of healing, there's also a way of tapping into the chakras, a core energy that is there as well. And this is what opens us up to, there's things, other ways of exploring this, which I haven't even tapped into as well. We know there are chakra associations with the different stones and crystals and essential oils and herbs and all of that, because again, it ties into the Hermetic laws, which is this principle of correspondence, that energy, which ties all of these different, seemingly different areas together on a theme. You can work with, sound or color or tone or scent, and it's going to bring you to a place of bringing that similar energy into balance. Working with affirmations is similar. So if we look at coming up to the winter solstice, this is the return of the light, the birth of the sun. The energy of that is hope and optimism. It doesn't matter how dark it gets. It doesn't matter how barren it gets. It doesn't matter how cold it gets. The sun is always going to come back again. It's always going to return. And at first it will be very weak, very delicate. It will grow in strength. And so an affirmation to work for the winter solstice is to tap into that. I step into my life with hope and optimism. It carries with it that resonance of the return of the sun. There's also, because the return of the sun, the birth of the child, the birth of the sun, the birth of the wonder child. There's so many myths about this child that has come to be the hope at this time of year. Then to see myself, there is that essence within myself that returns, right? I embrace the essence within, and I nurture and nourish that pure essence within. These are the energies that help to steer us towards that connection with self and empowerment.
The noble art provides a hands-on approach to build a foundation for honey energy healing, which you introduced in your previous book, The Great Work. And to clarify for viewers, I'm not referring to the honey of bees, but the Welsh word for energy, which sounds the same but spelled differently. At any rate, what is honey energy?
This just sort of came to me the other day when I was describing it, that I recognized that, honey is, there's so many different modalities to energy, right? There are many different ways to work with energy to bring us back into a place of balance, to bring us back into a place of wholeness and healing, to let go of the blocks and the energy blocks and the shadow and the heavy, right? That all energy healing is about bringing us back into a place of flow. One of the things that I found in the different ways of working with energy healing that I have done over the years, I've been working in this field for over 2 decades, seems ridiculous, but it's true, is how to sort of embed it in our body as well. This is what both the great work and the noble art is all about, is just bringing to awareness again the fact that we are not outside of nature. We are nature, not even a part of nature. Like we also are nature. And so honey reflects a way of working with energy, universal energy. Again, it's not that we are working with the energy, we are the energy. We consist of it as well. And this is what alchemy is all about as well, that I'm not working on something out there. As I work on something in here, I am impacting on something out there. They are connected together. So I've started to really see that honey, which, as you said, Welsh for energy, that honey is almost like a divine feminine reflection of energy healing, because it is about the embodiment of the process of working with energy. So in that, and there's, again, that's a whole other topic itself. There's just different little tweaks to working with energy and what the process looks like, what a session looks like, that make it different than something like therapeutic touch or Reiki. But it very much is about the relationship between the practitioner and the client. It's about bringing in a relationship to the earth and to different tools that we can work with, intuitive tools that can be brought into the session itself.
You Tiffany are a spiritual psychotherapist with many years of experience in transpersonal psychology, trained at the Transformational Arts College of Spiritual and Holistic Training, where you also teach, and own the Hive and Grove Center for Holistic Wellness in Kitchener. What originally drew you to psychotherapy?
Film. I was a film student. I did a 4-year degree in film and then realized that, oh, wait a second, it's not making films that I'm interested in. It's people's stories that I'm interested. So then I went back to school and specifically I would say, and I did learn this at film school, because film is like, it's telling, it's these archetypal themes and it's these timeless stories. And Joseph Campbell said, there's only so many stories that are being said. And then we say the same story over and over and over again, but in so many different ways. And to see that psychology is, it's turning the lens inwards so that I am interested in certainly myself, but as a psychotherapist, I don't see therapy as about finding out what's wrong with people and trying to fix it. This is what spiritual psychotherapy for me is about. I'm interested in listening to what your story is and what the truth of that story is and what the truth of you is and how to maybe bring you back into alignment with what that is.
Should viewers of Paranormal Yacker want to order the Noble Art or the Great Work, receive information about the Hive and Grove Center for Holistic Wellness, learn about your private therapy practice offering individuals, couples, and group therapy, as well as your self-development programs, what is your contact information?
So probably the easiest would be the website, www.hiveandgrove.ca, and that will bring you anywhere you need to go.
Tiffany Lazic, I thank you for being my guest on Paranormal Yacker. As you know, we go back many years. It was great connecting with you again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stan.
Hi, everyone. I'm Stan Mallow, the Paranormal Yacker. I hope you enjoyed the interview you just watched. To be sure you don't miss any interviews on my free YouTube channel, all you have to do is press the subscribe button on your screen.